Hello there, my Sapiens. Good morning. It's a new day for me, but you're like, it's another video for you. You could have just watched the last one. The whole day went by since last time. But good morning, my Sapiens. So real quick, module 46 to 47, I'm only going to go over a few important aspects that we should know for the vocab reasons, but a lot of, the stuff is kind of fluff along with a little few other aspects. So let's just quickly go through this one. There's only a few key aspects that are important to know, okay? So, we just went over Piaget's child development through cognition, and there is some environmental influences we have to think about before we go into Kohlberg and Erikson's theories, okay? So you can call this environmental influences. So real quick, I love this little thing, nature, nurture, either way, it's your parents' fault. But it's easy to say that how, our environment impacts behavior is based on the way you're raised, right? Because when we look at, but it's not just all the parents, because there's the prenatal environment, experience of brain and, brain development, peer influence, culture, gender. There's a lot of other factors other than just, everyone's saying it's your parents' fault, right? Don't get me wrong, parents are a huge aspect, but there's more factors to that, right? But there's more than that. Prenatal influences, nature doesn't begin at birth, it begins in the womb. And what I want you guys to write down is, this is just an intro, but we already talked, right, again, about teratogens, but if a mother takes drugs as an illness, and even excessive amount of stress can influence the baby's fetus. So again, another influence, and just the person who helped give me some of the slides and to help revamp them is Mandy. So there she is. But again, that's another influence. Experience and brain development. So for this one, just write down these bullet points, but there's some aspects of neural connection. If we live in an enriched environment, right? So going to preschool already puts you one up, right? Kind of like we already talked about, it seems to hold true that infants who are handled more gain weight rapidly and develop more. Just holding babies more, right? Who was held more, right? There's so many theories out there. And, when we talk about peer influence, where do we begin? Especially as we grow older, there's something called the selection effect, where kids choose friends similar to themselves, right? So for me, I always tended to gravitate towards my sports friends because I always loved sports, right? So that was kind of like my thing, and then nature does seem to play a role in influence of peers. We tend to spend most of our times with playing, and, we are quite sensitive to who our friends are, their opinions, and they do influence our life and our development. When it comes to, and this is more peer influence, right? So parents can also influence our ideas, our sense of education. I grew up in a household that education was it's like education before all else. Like if I was sick, I would have to be dying on my deathbed so I wouldn't have to go to school. But I always wanted to go to school because my mom and dad always taught me that education was super important, and here I am being a teacher, educating. So again, do what you want with that. But also our peers influence our ideas of sense of cooperation, popularity, interacting among our age. And then now just, diving into culture, again, it's a vocab term, but it's mentioned across our book, right? But, our behaviors, ideas, attitudes, and traditions shared by a large group. And, cultures differ, which also causes us to differ, but there's also norms within cultures, right? So rules for, acceptable and unacceptable behavior. So different norms often confuse us. So these are I always like to say, these are like the unwritten rules of society. So personal space, right, is a norm. We don't want to be really up close to people. Levels of expressiveness, right? We talked about emotions, and, I went through a lot of flip grids of people's responses, and, culture does weigh heavily on some aspects of emotion, and, who shows it, who's not, what's weak and what's not, right? And just our pace of life. So it's, in certain cultures, there's really big milestones, right? And so again, these all have influences on our development. For this slide, we don't need I would want you just to kind of more listen to this slide, but we already talked about individualistic versus collective. So Western cultures tend to be more individualistic, and collective tends to be more Asian and African cultures, communal cultures that emphasize family honor and dignity. I always think of Mulan. And like the part where it's like dishonor on your cow, like dishonor on your family. It's just, because it's different, like it's different aspects, different cultures. And there's a lot of similars within cultures, but also this has something to do with it as well, right? So I'm happy that we just learned this to connect it to this next chapter. And then just real quick on gender, right? We don't go too much into gender just because, the AP test doesn't really focus on this too much, just because, again, it kind of falls under a realm that, in some states, some things aren't taught in others. So, but nature, the genders differ genetically. So there's X and Y chromosomes signal production to different hormones. But nurture, gender is also socially determined, right? So there's the biological aspect. And then now, especially with our new 21st century, right, we are more diving into this nurture aspect of gender and how we identify. And so gender roles are expectations about the way women and men behave, right? So, is there a gender role that, women are supposed to cook and supposed to be more empathetic or, supposed to nurture? And then there's gender identity, which is the sense of being male or female and how you identify yourself, right? So again, these are just some quick terms that we kind of want to know, but I don't know if they would be on the test, but just so we would know. And then we also have gender typed, which is a acquisition. So I learn, right? So an acquisition of masculine or feminine role. So kind of how you develop your gender identity. What do you learn in order to be masculine and feminine? So again, these are just some layers into the gender aspect of all of our developmental lens. These are just some traditional female and male roles. Females expect to be shy, passive. Males expected to be leaders. You guys can read through this, but we talk about this a lot in class, and you don't have to write these down. But these are just some simple, classic traditional gender roles that we have most of us grown up with, right? I just love this picture. That's how I feel sometimes when I'm like cleaning the house. I'm like, ah. Anyway, so just some pictures. But these last little portions, this is an important theory to know. So this is one of the main reasons I wanted to do a quick lecture on this. Social learning theory. This theory is that children learn gender-linked behavior by observing and imitating, as well through rewards and punishments. I want you guys to think of a toy store. How do you know if a toy is geared towards females and males? Usually male toys are in a bluer range, females are in a pink range, right? So again, there's a lot of factors, right? So again, what your parents allow you to do, okay, real quick, fun fact. Okay, it's just a quick one. There was a serial killer, Brudos. I forgot what his first name was, but he wanted to dress up in like women clothes when he was young, and he wanted to wear heels. His mother stopped and said, like, you can't wear heels, like men don't wear heels. He turned out to be a serial killer later on, and he fixated on women's feet, and he would like chop off their feet to just put them in heels. Like, what if mom just let him wear heels? Like, who knows? But okay, guys, I know I got a little crazy right there, but just anyway, okay, moving on. So again, social learning theory, we are learning from our behaviors and observing people from our environment and what, is acceptable and what's not, rewards and punishments. And then there's the gender schema theory, which is a social learning theory plus cognition. So it's like social learning theory, a little bit of cognition. And what we get from that is that children learn from their cultures a concept of what it means to be female or male to adjust their behavior accordingly. You compare yourself with the concept of gender. Boys not be able not to do a sewing project, summer camp, because they perceived as girly things, right? So again, gender schema is just that. It's our social learning theory plus cognition and how children have their cultural concept of male and female prototype in their life as well. And, and so there has been a question about this theory will include the child's thinking about what she observes in the genders. So that is how you can kind of separate gender schema theory with our social learning theory. There you go. All right, my friends, this was just a quick little review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'll see you for the next video.